You've probably asked a child where they came from. Not in the biology sense, in the bigger sense. Where did people come from? Where did the world come from? Why is there something instead of nothing? And you've probably noticed that they answer immediately. No hesitation, no, I don't know. They just make something up. A story appears, fully formed. Sometimes it involves their parents, sometimes animals, sometimes magic, sometimes a mix of all three. They don't cite sources. They don't check facts. They don't seem uncertain. They tell it the way you'd tell someone your address, like it's obvious. And here's what's strange. If you ask a different child in a different country who's never met the first child, never heard their story, they'll tell you something remarkably similar. Not identical, but structurally similar. Same beats, same movements, same fundamental shape. Why do creation stories across cultures that never contacted each other follow the same patterns? Before we keep going, if this kind of quiet thinking is your thing, you might want to subscribe to Belief Explained Simply. These videos move slowly, sit with questions, and don't rush to conclusions. And if you know someone who enjoys conversations like this, feel free to share it with them. All right, let's keep going. There's a pattern that shows up everywhere humans tell stories about beginnings. Not just religious stories. All stories about where things came from consider the structure. First, there's nothing, or chaos, or darkness, or water, something formless. Then something acts. A word is spoken, a thought occurs, a being moves, a separation happens. Light from dark, sky from earth, order from chaos. Then stages, things emerge in sequence, not all at once. First the world, then plants, then animals, then humans. And finally, something goes wrong. A rule is broken. A boundary is crossed. Paradise is lost. That's not one creation story. That's the template for most of them. Genesis in the Hebrew Bible, formless void, then God speaks, light separates from darkness, creation happens in stages, humans break the rule, exile from Eden. The Enuma Elish from ancient Mesopotamia, primordial waters, gods emerge from chaos, Marduk creates order by separating sky and earth, humans are made, they're given labor, Egyptian creation myths, primordial waters called Nu, a mound emerges, the sun god Ra creates by speaking, order emerges from chaos, humans appear. Hindu Rigveda, cosmic egg or primordial waters, sacrifice of Purusha creates the world in stages, humans emerge with social order already embedded. Maori creation story, darkness and nothingness, the sky father and earth mother are separated, light enters, life emerges in sequence. Chinese Pangu myth, cosmic egg in chaos, Pangu emerges and separates yin and yang, heaven and earth form, creation happens in stages. These cultures didn't communicate, they developed independently, thousands of miles apart, thousands of years apart, and yet the same structure keeps appearing. You might say, well, they're all describing the same event, the actual beginning of the universe. And maybe that's true, but here's what makes that explanation incomplete. They're not describing what a beginning would actually look like if you were there. They're describing what a beginning feels like when you try to think about it, because nobody was there. Nobody observed it. Nobody has memory of it. These aren't eyewitness accounts. They're something else. They're the stories humans tell when we try to imagine something we can't actually imagine. The absence of everything. And apparently, when different groups of humans try to imagine that, we imagine it the same way. Let's sit with the structure for a moment. Why does it always start with chaos or void or darkness or water? Why not? First there was a tree, and then, why not? First there were humans, and then, because those don't feel like beginnings. They feel like middles. A tree implies soil, sun, seeds, time. A tree is already inside a system. Same with humans. Humans imply parents, food, shelter, language. The mind can't start there. It needs to go further back to something that doesn't imply anything else, something that just is. And what the mind finds there, or what it creates there, is formlessness, chaos, void, darkness, water. These aren't descriptions, they're concepts. They represent the absence of structure, the not yet organized, the potential before actualization. And then in every story, something happens to that formlessness. Order emerges, not gradually, deliberately, through intention or action or speech. Here's where it gets interesting. The sequence is almost always the same. First, the big structures, light and dark, sky and earth, day and night. Then the middle structures, land and sea, sun and moon, seasons. then living things, plants, then animals, then humans. Then social order, roles, rules, hierarchies, purposes. Why that sequence, you might say, because that's how evolution happened. Simple to complex. But these stories predate evolutionary theory by thousands of years. And besides, evolution doesn't happen in discrete stages with clear separations. It's messy, overlapping, full of dead ends and restarts. These stories aren't describing evolution. They're describing something else. They're describing how the mind organizes experience. Because that sequence, big structures, then medium structures, then small structures, then social structures, is how we learn to understand the world as children. First, you learn big distinctions. Light, dark, here, there, me, not me. Then medium distinctions, ground, sky, inside, outside, safe, dangerous. Then living things, plants, animals, people. Then social order, family, rules, roles, meanings. Creation stories follow the same sequence, which suggests they're not describing the formation of the world. They're describing the formation of a worldview, the process by which chaos becomes comprehensible. There's another pattern worth noticing. In almost every creation story, humans arrive late, not first, last, or near last. The world is already made, already functioning, already beautiful or terrible or both, and then humans are added. Why? If these stories were just invented to make humans feel important, wouldn't we put ourselves at the center? Wouldn't we arrive first? But we don't. We arrive at the end, after the stage is set, after everything else is in place, which suggests something else is happening. These stories aren't about human importance. They're about human dependence. They say, you didn't make this. This was here before you. You're part of something larger. You're not the foundation, you're built on top of it. That's not self-aggrandizement. That's humility, or at least it's recognition. Recognition that we exist inside systems we didn't create and can't fully control. The world precedes us, we inherit it, and that inheritance comes with implications. Here's another recurring element. In most creation stories, there's a moment of separation. The sky is separated from the earth, light from darkness, fresh water from salt water, the divine from the mortal. Something that was unified becomes divided. Why is separation so central? Because separation is how meaning happens. In a completely unified state, everything mixed together, undifferentiated, nothing can be distinguished from anything else. There's no up or down, no here or there, no this or that. Meaning requires difference, requires boundaries, requires the ability to say this is not that. And creation stories encode that insight. They say before meaning there was unity, and meaning arrived through division. That's not primitive cosmology, that's sophisticated philosophy. It's the recognition that distinction precedes understanding, that to know anything, you first have to separate it from everything else. Light means nothing without darkness. Life means nothing without death. Good means nothing without evil. The creation stories don't just describe a cosmological event. They describe the preconditions for thought itself. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. Most creation stories include a fall, a mistake, a transgression. Eden has the forbidden fruit. Pandora has the box. Prometheus steals fire. The Maori siblings separate their parents against divine will. Paradise exists, and then paradise is broken. Why? Why not just, creation happens, everything's perfect, the end? Because that story doesn't match experience. If the world were perfectly designed and nothing went wrong, suffering wouldn't exist, pain wouldn't exist, death wouldn't exist, but they do exist. So the stories incorporate that reality. They say, yes, things are broken, but they weren't always broken. There was a moment when it went wrong, and here's what's worth noticing. In almost every story, the breaking involves knowledge. Eve eats from the tree of knowledge. Pandora's box contains knowledge of suffering. Prometheus brings the knowledge of fire. Knowledge breaks paradise, which seems strange at first. Why would knowledge be dangerous? But think about what knowledge does. Knowledge makes you aware of what you don't have, aware of what could be different, aware of your own mortality. Before knowledge, there's no dissatisfaction, no longing, no awareness that things could be otherwise. After knowledge, there's comparison, judgment, the painful recognition of gap between what is and what could be. The fall isn't punishment, it's consequence. It's what happens when consciousness becomes self-conscious. When you can step outside your experience and evaluate it, that capacity is what makes us human, and it's also what makes us suffer. The creation stories know this. They're not describing ancient history, they're describing the structure of human consciousness. Let's look at another pattern. In many creation stories, humans are made from earth, from clay or dust or mud. Genesis, God forms Adam from dust. The name Adam is related to Adama, ground, earth. Mesopotamian myths, humans are made from clay mixed with divine blood. Greek mythology, Prometheus molds humans from clay. Egyptian myths, the god Khnum sculpts humans on a potter's wheel from Nile clay. Chinese mythology, Nua creates humans from yellow earth. Different cultures, same material. Why earth? Why not water or air or fire? Because earth is what returns. When humans die, we decompose. We become soil. We return to ground. The creation stories are encoding an observation. We come from earth and we return to earth. Dust to dust isn't poetic. It's literal. It's biology described in pre-scientific language, but it's also more than that. Because earth isn't just material. It's ground. It's foundation. It's what supports everything else. To be made from earth is to be fundamentally connected to the physical world, to be part of the cycle, to be temporary. The stories are saying, you're not separate from nature, you're continuous with it. That's not primitive ignorance, that's ecological wisdom. Here's something else that appears repeatedly. Creation often happens through speech, through naming, through the word. Genesis, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Egyptian myths, the god Ptah speaks creation into existence. Hindu traditions, the cosmic sound Om creates and sustains reality. Maori stories, the god Io speaks things into being. Why speech? Why not thought or gesture or will? Because speech is how humans create shared reality. Before you name something, it exists, but it doesn't exist socially. It doesn't exist in common understanding. Once you name it, everyone can refer to it, can think about it, can organize behavior around it. Speech doesn't just describe reality, it creates social reality. And the creation stories recognize this. They say, the world as we understand it, the world of meaning, not just matter, came into being through language. That's not myth, that's anthropology. Human reality is linguistic reality. We live in a world of named things, defined relationships, spoken agreements. The creation stories encode that truth. They say, in the beginning was the Word, because without the Word, there's no shared world. There's a pattern in how these stories are transmitted too. They're not written down first. They're spoken, repeated, performed, generation after generation. The same story, with variations, but always the same structure. Why preserve these stories with such care? Because they're not just entertainment, they're not just explanations, they're the foundation of social cohesion. When everyone knows the same creation story, everyone shares the same understanding of where we came from, what we're for, what went wrong, how things should be. That shared understanding is what makes a we possible. Without it, you have individuals. With it, you have a people. The creation story isn't describing the origin of the world, it's creating the origin of a community. It's the story that says, this is who we are, this is where we fit, this is what we're part of. And different communities need different versions. Not because one is true and others are false, but because each community needs to recognize itself in the story. Here's the thing that makes this all stranger. Modern cosmology, the scientific account of cosmic origins, follows remarkably similar patterns. First, there's the Big Bang, an initial moment of formlessness, infinite density, no structure. Then separation, the fundamental forces separate. Matter and antimatter separate. Particles form from energy. Then stages, first the simplest elements, then stars, then heavier elements, then planets, then eventually life. Then complexity, simple life, complex life, consciousness, language, culture. And embedded in this story is a kind of fall, entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, the inevitable decay of order into disorder. The story structure is the same. Are we describing what actually happened, or are we imposing the same narrative structure our minds have always imposed? Maybe both. Maybe the reason ancient creation stories and modern cosmology share the same pattern is because that pattern reflects something true, not about the universe, but about how consciousness structures understanding. We need a beginning. We need stages. We need separation that leads to complexity. We need something that explains why things aren't perfect. Those needs don't change just because we have better instruments. Here's the question that won't resolve. Are creation stories attempts to explain physical origins, Or are they maps of consciousness? Are they pre-scientific cosmology that we've now outgrown? Or are they encoding insights about meaning, order, language, and social cohesion that science can't touch? Maybe they're both. Maybe the ancients were doing two things at once, trying to explain the world and trying to organize human experience of the world. And maybe we've kept the explanation part, updated it, refined it, made it empirical, but lost the organization part. We can describe the Big Bang, we can trace the formation of stars, planets, life, but that description doesn't tell us what we're for, doesn't give us social cohesion, doesn't create a shared we. The ancient creation stories did both. They explained origins incorrectly by modern standards, and they organized communities, effectively, by any standard. We've gained accuracy, but we've lost the function. You've probably noticed this yourself. When someone asks a child where people came from, the child makes up a story, and the story has structure, has stages, has meaning. The child isn't confused, isn't uncertain. The child is doing what humans do, creating order from chaos, not because the order is true, but because the mind needs it. And maybe that's what all creation stories are, not descriptions of events, but demonstrations of how minds work. The formless becomes formed, the chaotic becomes ordered, the meaningless becomes meaningful. That's not what happened in the beginning. That's what happens every time a human tries to understand anything. The patterns aren't in the universe, they're in us, and we keep projecting them outward, onto the past, onto the cosmos, onto the origins, not because we're wrong, but because we can't help it, because making patterns is what minds do. And maybe, just maybe, the reason every creation story follows similar patterns isn't because they're all describing the same cosmic event. It's because they're all created by the same kind of mind. A mind that needs beginnings, needs order, needs meaning, a mind that can't rest in formlessness. So it speaks. And in speaking, just like the stories say, if this raised something for you, an agreement, a disagreement, or even just a question, you're welcome to share it in the comments. Not answers, just what this brought up for you. I read them. Also, please subscribe, like, and share. His helps us to grow and create more contents like this.